Today I have the pleasure of interacting with the industry heads who really will throw a lot of insight and expertise on how they think from their own experience and what they feel should be done to scale up. And without further ado, I think we all are aware of who these industry experts are. I will not get into the introduction of them, but let me straight away get to the point and go to Mr. Sanjeev Bajaj, President CII. Sir, thank you so much. Well, you've been leading the industry representations and you've been talking to the government all along. I think good thing is that they are on the same page. They understand that there is a need for us to leverage this next 10 years and scale up to the levels that we'd not seen before. Unprecedented growth is what we've seen, and perhaps we will be able to get to it. Now, my question to you is, while there are very interesting big brands that have been able to make that impact, the uniformity of it is not yet seen. What is it that needs to be done at to start with, so that we can have a very uniform approach and growth for these companies to go global?
Swati, firstly, unfortunately in life, nothing happens in a uniform manner. You have to grab opportunity. I think there are three prerequisites to build global brands or to look at markets outside. The first is capability and capacity. You have to have a product or service which has both excellence built around it and of a particular size to be able to do that. And if you look at Indian IT services, you have global brands over there. If you look at a few other sectors, look at motorcycles, Bajaj, TVS, Hero, all global brands. Pharma is another sector. So there are some sectors that have already built those set of capabilities and capacity. So I think that's one prerequisite. The second is opportunity. Yeah. And by opportunity, what I mean is that in any market, once you've met the first prerequisite, you need to find a space from where you can enter the market and start. Because there are competing products or services available everywhere. So it's important to get your focus right, to take, even if it is a reasonably small part of the market, build your presence, build visibility, build brand. This requires patience as well, and then build it up from there. And the third requirement is, I think, one of attitude. Now, sometimes in a country as large as ours, there's enough of a domestic market. So there are a lot of top quality companies providing products and services who may say, I don't need to go outside of India at all. And there's nothing wrong in that. Yeah. On the other hand, you have companies and brands that say that, no, I want to be global. That is what I strive for. That's what I'm passionate about. So I think attitude is the third important thing.
Let me come to you, Mr. Advani, because when we talk of the opportunities that FTAs, for example, throw, and I think of late, with the kind of dialogue that we are having with many countries where there's opportunity, again, this is our time to look at it. First and foremost, your own sense and how you see that progressing, the kind of advantage it will bring to us. And secondly, the global supply chain. I think, how do we best integrate in that system, because we are still not there. I mean, I remember in Davos, we've had these conversations of China +1, but that's a passe. It's ABC is equal to I, which is anything but China is India. So I guess this is what the formula we are talking about. So what's your sense?
Sure, Swati. You know, as far as FTAs are concerned, I think the context is important. In the 90s and 2000s, we signed FTAs with competitors. Competitive countries, and so Indian industry did not benefit from any of them. So there's a lot of skepticism in industry about FTAs. The new FTAs that we're signing are more complementary. These are with end markets, target markets, which have large opportunity for Indian industry. So I think it's important that we look at these FTAs with a new light or a new view. In terms of how we can really leverage these FTAs, I think there's a role for government, there's a role for industry. For government, I think it's about disseminating and educating industry about these complex trade documents. These are not just about tariffs, they're much more complex. I think there's an opportunity to set up some capacity building initiatives around, say, FTA facilitation centers around the country that will enable this. And I think we all agree that trade without investment is not so effective. And so I think the Indian government can continue on its current effort to promote FDI into manufacturing in India for partner countries. So that's what the government can do. As far as industry, I think it's our responsibility to upskill ourselves and take advantage of these FTAs. I think it's very important. Non-tariff barriers are very prevalent, and so I think we should all go back to the government proactively and explain to them what these NTBs are and ask them to represent with these partner countries. I think that can be effective. And then, of course, it comes down to competitiveness, right? At the end of the day, like you said, it is not just about China plus one without competitiveness. So Indian manufacturing has to become more competitive. We have to improve our quality standards. We have to understand what kind of standards and compliances these advanced countries need. We need to design that into our products so that they're more accepted. And finally, like I said, trade without investment is irrelevant. So Indian industry must look at outward bound investment, making investment into partner countries in terms of manufacturing capacity, etc. And finally, I think what Sanjeev mentioned, which is at the end of the day, an FTA is only going to be effective if we have consumers in partner countries who want to buy our products. And that will only happen if brand India is promoted. And so it's a responsibility of the Indian government, it's a responsibility of all of us here, all our members, all of Indian industry, to put forward that money to build brand India and make a difference.
Okay, brand India, that's what we need to do and promote for us to be accepted in different parts of the world, as you talked about. Fair enough. Mr. Kambata, agri-food, that's one space where we've seen a huge focus again. If you see the budget, if you see the conversations again around how much we can leverage there. And of course, with the aid of technology now, I think that's going to be a game changer. So your sense in that space, we've seen a lot of startups also work around it. What's your assessment and your understanding of how we can use technology again and scale up the agri beyond the borders?
Thank you. At the onset, I would like to wish everybody, some Bawas in the audience, Happy Nowruz. Yes. And today's day is very significant because it shows how the world changes. 2,000 years back, in the Persian empires ruled the world. Yes. Completely. Until India. And at that time, this was the New Year of the world. So whatever. So it's a pleasure. CII invited me here. Now to come to your question, of course, I've been working in this space since long. And we always used to call food processing the sunrise sector. And I'm so happy in the last few years, at least we have seen the sunrise. So that I think is a good news. And how I am saying it is a good news is that, at least in my mind, the integration of agriculture, food processing, consumer, especially from Make in India export, has all happened now. And we can see that in certain sectors where India has already become number 2 or 3 in the world. Yeah. To give it just an example, honey. In a very small time, India is today probably the second largest exporter of honey from in the world. So that shows. And to be honest, your question on SMEs, it is not led by the big companies. The honey thing is all being led by MSMEs, just to give an example. So there are some very good examples. Now, you will ask me what is required to be done, and of course I'm part of a lot of these discussions. And I think the good news is that the PLI has been announced in the food processing sector. And the PLI has been announced not only for capacity building, but also for brand building abroad, the Make in India brand. And this was a specific CII recommendation which has been sort of accepted by the ministry. And today, this is the only sector in which you have money coming, 50% of the money you spend abroad on brand building comes from the government. And a lot of MSMEs are also taken the advantage. Similarly, this sector is available for millets, which I believe is very important because millets will change the way. Like we have launched a millet soup and a lot of things are happening in millet. And I always believe, like one crop, one district, India should stand for a few products. Like there is a wine from XYZ, almonds from... Why not we have, let us say, millets from India? And it's a healthy food. It is good for the farmer. It is good for the industry. It is good for the customer. Why industry? Because it gives us that extra edge. And I was part of many such deliberations, and I believe most important thing is to ensure that we GI patent the millet. Like Scotch whiskey has to be from Scotland, Indian millet has to be from India, and this is something industry and the government has to work together. And I'm very happy to tell you, I'm also part of it, to ensure that we patent or whatever, ensure that this millet becomes our property.
Yeah.
Then we all Indians can get advantage. And last, I think, let me tell you, is the integration with the farmer. We do all this in food processing and exports, but if the benefit doesn't go to the farmer, then we should not be in this industry. The whole idea of us being, and I'm not preaching on a politician at all, but if the farmer doesn't get double the income or more income, why should he grow? And if he doesn't grow, farmer will become extinct, industry will fall. This is happening in developed markets. Nobody wants to grow. If nobody grows, where is food processing happening? Okay, we are not going to grow. So I think it is in our interest as industry and customer to ensure that the farmer earns a good income and he grows better crops, he grows organic crops, he grows natural crops, he earns, he flourishes, and so rural industry develops, and that's how we will get benefit, and of course the whole nation. That is the need of the hour. This is my belief.
Okay, fair enough. And I think interesting millets, well, the government has taken again some heed to it, and in the budget we've seen the year of millets as was announced by the finance minister. Mr. Bajaj, now talking about the digitization space, and I think there's so much that's happened, and the way we do business has been completely transformed. In many ways, COVID aided us to adopt technology in a way where now most people are not savvy, but they are aware of how to handle technology and do business, meaningful business with good productivity and efficiency. Now, how do we leverage that bit? And especially when it comes to financial sector, I think the game has changed with the globalization that we're talking about. Your sense and your vision on how technology will aid the whole financial sector. What will be the new age form of, when you lose the physical money, but it is all going to get digitized? What's the future looking like?
See, there are times of discontinuity which create tremendous opportunity. If you look at the last 200 years, countries like us have basically imported technology, imported innovation, and produced products, services towards that. A large number of standards have been created in the global West, and the rest of the world has followed those. But times of discontinuity create opportunity for innovation and a chance to reset. And I think the digitalization of the world and also financial services is one such significant opportunity which India has already been grasping. So if you see over the last decade, our entire India digital stack, which is using Aadhaar as the digital identity, our digital bank accounts, digital KYC, UPI as the digital currency, this network that has been created on a set of open digital free protocols developed by the government of India, which businesses can use and create their own business models and services, is truly unique in the world.
Sure.
Because in most parts of the world, this has been created by the private sector, and then accordingly there is a monopoly on control of that. Today, for example, a MasterCard and a Visa, they earn every time you swipe your card because they've built that capability, and it's deserving for them to earn that. So India is in a very unique situation where in the digital world, we have created these set of digital public goods on which we are now seeing, and COVID, as you're saying correctly, has accelerated that. In the last 5 years, we are seeing adoption at global scale, at lowest costs in the world, and I would say, forget as good as somewhere else, far better than what you can see in most other parts of the world. Look at today how we pay peer-to-peer. Four of us go to a restaurant and you can divide the bill. There is a QR code that comes up with 1/4 amount for each one of us, and we don't even think twice about it. 5 years ago, this didn't exist. When you're ordering on Zomato today, or you're ordering on Flipkart or Amazon, and very soon you will use Bajaj Pay, all of you. But this is becoming second nature, which also goes to show our inherent digital, I would say, comfort. And this is not just for the youngsters over here. Look at our parents, look at the grandparents of kids, how easily in the last few years they have gotten to adopt this technology.
True.
So we are in this unique position of discontinuity. We have a set of digital innovation tools. I'm talking financial services, but there are in many other sectors.
Sure.
India, as you know, announced last month in India, and the Singapore government has now linked UPI with Pay Now, which is their equivalent for small value transactions. And India is doing this with multiple other countries. So I think the opportunity over here is tremendous, and as a government and as people, we are grabbing that opportunity. And I'm very confident in some of these spaces, you will start to see Indian technology, Indian innovation, world class, being used in many parts of the world.
Sure, but I mean, I'm tempted to ask you this because what we are seeing globally also, like SVB or Credit Suisse, now these are serious issues, and the financial institutions per se, what is their future? The heavyweights and have to now figure a new way or lease of life, because perhaps, as you said, digitization is changing the way things are done. So the future of the financial institutions, especially the big ones, what is it that they need to do to ensure that they don't have to go through what the two institutions I just talked about had to?
So, as Uday Kotak gave his interview yesterday, which came in the papers today, and this is very real. As a financial institution, and especially as a banking institution where you keep money that belongs to others, trust is very important, and trust comes from prudence. You can never let growth overtake risk, and managing your balance sheet is very critical in any lending institution. It's something that, for example, Bajaj Finance focuses on. We are very clear, and we've had very good growth, as you know, over the last decade and a half. But we always say we are a risk-first company, because risk drives everything else. We will gladly sacrifice growth to make sure that we keep a healthier balance sheet and stronger risk controls. So one should never forget that. Yes. And sometimes being a listed entity, being in this public world, everybody's comparing, that guy is growing, you're only growing 30%, next guy is growing 40%. 30% means I'm doubling every 2.5 years. But that doesn't matter. You get caught in this rat race, and that is where I believe public markets sometimes have their downsides. And that's where strong promoter-led companies, where there is enough control that good quality promoters have, will always do well in the long term, because we are not diverted by short-term trends of the market. We want to build businesses, not only to make money, everybody wants to make money, but to build credibility, to build something for our nations. And that's what differentiates good quality companies from others.
Okay, fair enough, and that's a good point on the trust that really makes all the difference here, and we need to keep that intact over risk. Mr. Sinha, we talked about the PLI schemes and so many different avenues that the government is trying to, again, work on to push exports, right? Now, the global volatility and the global gloom and doom, India, of course, is the shining bright star, as we see, but where do you export? I mean, where is the demand globally? So, in that context, right now, do we see this as an opportunity to maybe build inwards and, service the domestic market, and maybe later on look at exports as an opportunity? And eventually, if you were to look at India to become the export hub, especially when you talk of smart meters or energy-related infrastructure or hardware, where do you see the role of the government in pushing it, and how geared up is the industry right now, sir?
First of all, I think in the energy sector, in the power sector, there is no need actually to export. There is a huge market in the country, and the technology that has come, and I mentioned about the decarbonization and the decentralization. So that opens up a huge potential, and as Sunil mentioned about these small and medium scale industry. Just to give you an example, India has 600,000 odd villages. If you can set up microgrids in those places where you generate electricity, the technology today is there because you can generate locally and you can supply locally. And the whole ecosystem can be developed over there by integrating with the micro enterprises which can happen. So I think the access of energy in rural areas can be really transformative, and especially when we see that today India has 3 crores, 30 lakh pump sets, and how do we do the solarization of that? And that gives opportunity to our small and medium industry, that how do they rise to the occasion and do it? You mentioned about smart meters. India has one of the largest number of meters in the country, 25 crores. So 250 million is a huge number. And today in the country, we do not have capacity even to manufacture 2 crore meters, leave alone. And if we have to change all that in next 5 years, you can imagine the type of opportunity that it creates. So the whole ancillary industries that can be developed, and these are all, again, small scale and medium scale industries which can. So I think the opportunity that is being created under PLI is more to meet our inside requirement, because most of these things we were earlier importing. Most of it was concentrated in one country from where we were getting import, not only India, but also globally they were supporting. In fact, many of the things, and nearly 80 to 90% import happens from that country.
Sure. Okay.
And I think whether it is for batteries or it is for any of the solar panels, any of the equipments, everything comes from that country. And for us, if we start looking inward and say that we will develop our local skill sets, we'll develop our manufacturing capability, we'll develop our own capabilities to do that, I think
Sure.
we are good for next 20, 30 years.
Okay, so intent is there. We would like to do it. The problem is whether we have capabilities to do it. And Mr. Advani, I would like to ask you that, because as an OEM, when you said that we need to build our supply chain, our partners who can provide those inputs, do you rely a lot on the Indian MSMEs in that sense? Or you still feel there is an issue, or we need to really work harder on getting the quality right? Because, there is still a bit of a gap there. And when you say that you need that to be built here, what needs to be done to be able to build that?
Sure, Swati. But just before that important point to Sanjeev, we're really looking forward to Bajaj Pay. But there's one important thing, that all presidents and ex-presidents of CII are not allowed to divide their restaurant bill into 2, 3, or 4. So please continue to buy us your good meals, yeah?
The Marwadi in me doesn't.
So sorry, Swati, back to you. I made a mention of it. To succeed in global value chains, we need to build a domestic ecosystem, because simply importing components and converting them into finished goods and trying to export them, we will never be competitive. So what is the issue there? One of the issues is that we have an inverted duty structure in many products. Our trade policy is not balanced for exports, very frankly. We have become very conservative and protective in India about imports. I think we need to rethink that if we want to engage with the global world. What we need to do is we need to work as large OEMs. We need to make the investment along with our ecosystem, which are combination of MSMEs and combination of technology companies. Work with them to build that domestic capacity and production, and support them in quality, in standards, in compliances, and really carry them with us as we move outside the country. So I think it's a very different approach to how we have to go to market. And I'm not sure that many of us have thought through that fully.
Okay, so you're saying we're not ready yet to the levels that we should, right?
That's right.
Okay,
right.
so there's a lot of work we need to still do. Mr. Chaudia, that brings the question to you as MSMEs, and the need of an OEM and what we need to do to build a world-class product. I think the uniformity, which again Sanjeev was initially talking about, and I agree, it's not there fully. But when do we get there, and how do we get there? That becomes a big challenge, because it also involves a lot of cost, and perhaps that is one hindrance why we don't get the kind of quality that we need. So how do you bridge that, and how do you work around that?
So, I have seen some models. My answer will be extension of my answer to the first question. Japan has done long back, one district, one product. Similarly, I have seen similar model working in Thailand. In India also, without much noise, without much hype, there are places where certain products are made without big noise. There's a small place in Maharashtra, Ichalkaranji. They produce best quality of tensile testing machines.
Sorry?
Tensile testing machines, equipments which are used for, material testing. Okay. There are certain districts in Gujarat who do it very well in CNC machines, and earlier they used to make lathe machines. There are some places in Punjab who do the same. Apart from that, there are products which are handicrafts, okay, which are produced in different parts of the country. So if we can focus on creating one district, one product, okay, and formally support all those businesses. Whatever has happened till now is without much support from the government, without much support from the ecosystem. It has become successful because of the entrepreneurship quality of our, business people. If we can support through infrastructure, what Mr. Sinha talked about, electrical infrastructure, if we can provide them road infrastructure, if we can provide them common facilities for quality testing, for effluent treatment, because now we cannot have manufacturing with a lot of pollution. Okay, but it is very difficult for SMEs and small companies to develop their own infrastructure. So if we, for next 5-10 years, if we can focus on creating infrastructure, creating focused approach to help such businesses, I think our SMEs, our small businesses in villages, in districts can become global.
Okay, sure. So some models that you talked about, Japan and Thailand, but sir, are you ready to support them is the question. Are they, for you to, because, no, I'm asking Mr. Advani because he says that there has to be a collaborative approach. Absolutely. So where's the reluctance?
So, no. So it's not about reluctance. I wanted to just add on to that a different dimension of this. I think that, of course, Indian OEMs and Indian large manufacturers have to step up and support this, but there can be a parallel track that we take. We should be looking at attracting large multinationals to come in and make manufacturing investments here, especially if we upgrade our SEZ policy. We can attract them for integration in a global value chain. So if we can have an understanding with large multinationals, come and make investment in SEZs, give them certain incentives, but in exchange require them to support a domestic ecosystem within the SEZ for their global value chain. That's another way of pushing this.
Okay,
so I think it's a combination of large Indian companies and multinationals working together to make
sure,
this
the
happen.
export-oriented units that the government is anyway working on revamping the old policy. So
We've been waiting for a while.
Yes,
it's yet to happen.
Mr. Baba Kalyani put his recommendations, we're aware. Mr. Kambata, half the population is still untapped in the sense when we talk of the women role and their contribution. I think there have been multiple studies which have proved that if women join the workforce or if they participate in the economic development of a country, it really gives you good results. Many statistics say it. Now, how do we bring in more women in workplace? That element and dimension we cannot miss out because that will value add tremendously. It's like leaving out opportunity that you have, but it needs some work. So what's your sense, sir? Because you are part of some of those committees and deliberations as well.
Let me tell you, I'm enjoying here. My daughter is in office, my wife is in office, my sister is in office. So they are doing all the work. So between us, they are the ones who are driving the company.
So good.
So we have got our own example. Yes. So, no, but I do believe that in what I call inclusive growth, with diversity, inclusiveness of all sections is the way to grow. And why only women? I always believe that all the people should get it. That's why I'm very interested in CII in affirmative action, ensuring that SC, ST, marginalized communities, minorities, people from PWD, all types of people get into the mainstream of work. And I don't see there is to be any difference at the stage of employment or sourcing. On the contrary, in sourcing and employment, we can give them a little bit step ahead to ensure that they come and be part of it. And I honestly believe that when it comes to integrity, honesty, hard work, we gain a lot by ensuring this to happen. But on the first question which was being debated on infrastructure, I have got a small point, and that is that when the government has allowed FDI in many places, earlier it was closed, like for example, e-com. Now they said 100% allowed, 75% allowed. There should be some stipulation that X amount will be spent on infrastructure in rural areas. If you are making, let us say you're going to be only on the retail and consumer end and not going to invest in the village, for example, you are going to set up a grocery e-com chain. So you will have good hardware, you will market, you will spend thousands of crores on advertising your brand. But if you don't invest money in cold storage, helping the farmer, so it has no use. So there should be a stipulation which forces people, or what is it, incentivizes people to ensure that they also invest in the area where investment is required. That has been my belief always.
Okay, fair enough. So those are some of the points that I think we can incorporate and bring in. But Mr. Bajaj, the manufacturing becomes the biggest, I would say, it's been stagnant for years. There's been a lot of work that we've tried to do to scale that up and make it a quarter of our GDP, but we are still not there. Now, the gaps that need to be filled in for that, there have been efforts, but probably we've not yet succeeded there. So that's number one. How do we work around to make sure we manufacture again as we manufacture? Till we do it, we don't get, that scale that we're talking about. So what are the gaps that we still have to fill in, and who needs to step up? Is it the government or is it the industry?
See, that's actually a very broad question, and a few thoughts from my side. One, again, there are sectors where you have globally capable manufacturers. So if you see their example and try to extrapolate that, clearly sectors where India itself is a large market allows for both capacity and capability to be built. Second is a sense of direction, or one may say priority or focus from the government, and focus on these 14 PLI sectors. And you see the early results, as I mentioned earlier, in electronics or in mobile phones. For Apple to make its latest phones over here, to make the iPads, to announce the AirPods will now be made over here. It's a tremendous shot in the arm for Indian quality. And for every one such Apple, there'll be 10 others that will come following the confidence that a global company like Apple creates. So I think the PLI can be a game changer. As you said, the ABC equals to I is a very significant and real game changer for the next few decades. It's not only a matter of a few years. In addition, the significant drive of the government for improving the ease of doing business, for reducing the cost of doing business, and this is something that is a continuous effort. When we meet the senior leaders in the government, one of the things they always end the conversation is to tell us, give us your next set of recommendations. So a very proactive and supportive government. I think a combination of these factors, if we are sitting 10 years down the line, we will be applauding many more sectors and companies that have created global champions from here.
Absolutely. I think global champions is the... Do you want to add on, Mr. Kabata?
See, we have talked of the opportunities, but on this globalization, I will also like to a little bit dwell on the challenges.
Yes. I was coming to that.
Because why I'm saying is because, honestly speaking, the opportunities always comes with challenges. And I think we should talk about it, especially the fact that the B20 presidency is with India this year. And CII is the secretariat, and we have a big advantage there. In my mind, there are 2-3 things which are really affecting international trade. And so I will like to dwell upon those 2-3 things. And that, in my mind, is a good opportunity because at least we can put it on the high table of the G20 from B20. And B20 is more about real business. G20 is more about politics, as we know. So coming to the things, number one thing is to ensure that the technology flows from the bigger nations to the smaller developing nations. You can't hold on to technology. We have seen in this vaccine what happened. 2 companies, 3 companies holding the technology. And what happened? On the contrary, I somehow believe that this vaccine technology would have reached a lot of people, like the AstraZeneca reach. We were able to save lives. Why not the other technology was able to reach? Why not more manufacturing? Similarly in medicine, similarly in agro. Now, for example, there is a huge need for making fertilizer-free, chemical-free crops. Now, few companies are sitting on that technology. Why can't we broad-base it? Why can't we open sources? And how do we ensure that at least in sectors which really affect the common man, which really affect agriculture, climate, health, there has to be this. And I think this is what this 20 nations can achieve, not 20 actually, if you put Europe it is more, can achieve together, that how do we ensure that the technology comes free for I would not say free, everything comes with a price, license or something, but it is accessible at the time so that the development comes together.
Sure.
Number two is that I somehow believe that India is at a unique space, that because when the world developed, there was no fancy about this sustainable goals and all these things. Now we have to develop with these goals in mind.
Yeah.
But I'm very happy with that. But there should be one more goal, I somehow believe, and that goal has to be goals on employment of PWDs, affirmative action, what I said earlier. It can't be just other development goals in terms of sustainable
Inclusive,
goals. And inclusiveness should also be part of this, what I call growth and the agenda. Third important thing which I have been part of many dedication is there are barriers, there are trade barriers, and there are unfair trade barriers. I never have minded trade barriers, but I definitely have a problem with unfair trade barriers, and I'll show you right and concrete examples. The day we see that certain agro crops increase the exports from India, suddenly they find that there are some issues with the quality here and there. Till then there were no issues. So it is very clear that there are unfair trade barriers happening, and which is to a complete disadvantage of countries like us which are developing, because we want to grow in this market.
Sure.
Now suddenly, so I somehow believe the way out, at least in my sector I will tell you, is that most of the time the barriers are in terms of specifications. As I told you, it is just to show you call face. So if we can ensure that internationally all the countries use one standard, which is the Codex standard.
Sure.
So no, there is one standard. Every country there is a Codex standard. So everybody says we will adapt that standard. So if mango has a certain requirement, suddenly mango export grows, they can't stop it. They say we will not follow excise a country standard. We will follow the Codex standard. Let India also follow the Codex standard. But then what happens? The same will happen for India also. If we also want to put a barrier on some crop, we can't, because we also have to follow Codex standards. So what I'm saying is a pretty normal thing. And this is happening in almost many industries. This type of unfair trade barriers. Somehow G20 has to come together to remove unfair trade barriers, and which will be a great help for industry.
Okay.
So these are the three things I want to leave on the table.
Absolutely. So great points of where we can, plug the gaps and work towards globalization, as you talked about. Mr. Advani, your inputs on the kind of challenges, and that's exactly where I was coming from. We've talked about the opportunities, but where do you think now we need to do as an industry, or for the government now to look at it? Very pinpointed points that we can, throw or talk about. As Mr. Bajaj was saying, that government is proactively listening to every time, give us a set of recommendations, and I must congratulate that majority of them were taken up in this budget. We discussed it. So clearly they're hearing, they understand. So what are some of the points that you would like to make here?
So 2 points, Swati. One is as far as, and I prefer to look at the opportunity side. I think that I think the government and industry can work together on R&D incentives and really pushing R&D. We spend a lot on R&D as a country, more than we have imagined, but yet it is not being put to productive use. I think there's an opportunity to divert some of that public spending in R&D to make it public-private partnership investment, so that we build marketable products and solutions that can compete globally. So I think like a PLI, we've been talking about some kind of R&D linked incentives for the private sector that can be a game changer. So that's one thought. The other one is very different. It is technology related but different. It's an opportunity in my mind. Like Industry 4.0 technologies are revolutionizing manufacturing. When you apply those technologies to trade, what we call Trade 4.0 technologies, again, there can be big disruption.
Okay.
What do I mean by that? If you just imagine you implement AI or 3D printing or robotics into Trade 4.0, into that technology, it can significantly change the competitiveness of a country and therefore redirect trade flows. Now, India is in a unique position. We are at the cutting edge of Industry 4.0 technologies. We understand it as an industry, as people, as software services industry. If we can channel that competitive advantage in technology that we have, apply it to trade, there's a real opportunity to divert some very large trade flows towards India and really move us out of this 2.5% of global trade that we're stuck in. So these are just some thoughts that I have.
Okay, fair enough. Some interesting points that the government... We will, sir. We'll just finish this and then we'll talk to the audience. Yes, sure. Mr. Chaudhary, your points on MSME, lots been done. You said there are 3 things that we need, financing, infrastructure, etc. But what next? I mean, has government done its bit? Now the industry has to scale up. Where is the gap?
You know, as it is emerging from the discussion, everyone is saying, and we are all seeing the opportunities. We are all seeing the Indian market is also there. Global market is also there. People are looking for China plus. Okay, so opportunities are enough. I think the only caution we as a country should take that this opportunity is not concentrated in few hands. This goes to many more companies, many more people. It goes, the opportunity should be available to entrepreneurs and business people across the country.
Okay.
And I think that is very important. And where the role of government is very important. Okay, so this opportunity should be available to many more companies, which will solve the long-term problem of our country.
Sure, I think, well, the companies can scale up.
So it will also reduce the divide between
the big and the small.
The big and the small, and we will not have social problem going ahead.
Fair enough. Mr. Sinha, green energy, that's the theme we're leading. We talked about it, but some of the things that you think now need to be done to concretize what we've announced so far and get on to the action plan. Where do you think the government needs to now participate?
I think of the very many things that is happening in the country, there is also a disconnect between the federal government, the central government, and the state government. And I think many of the things that the other panelists spoke about, that all the right signals are there, right opportunities are there, but why are we not able to move at a much faster pace? So this is the decade of the country, and there's so much that can happen. And so is and there are many sectors where it is the delivery has to happen in the states. So whether it is in land, or it is in the industrial sector, or it is in education, health, power, these are all in the concurrent list. And until and unless the states also come on board, the speed of change that is has to happen is not happening. And while the central government, the union budget was an excellent budget, took care of everything that was asked by the industry, but the translation when it happens in the states is not keeping pace. And I think that's an area that we need to work more for really getting into the 2-digit growth that we are looking at.
Okay, so the state center coordination, I think a lot of work needs to be done there. Quickly, last remarks from Mr. Bajaj, because we need to understand from the overall industry perspective, sir, what are the next set of recommendations that you are taking to the government?
Well, that the next leadership will decide what are the next set of recommendations to take to the
your
government.
inputs before you.
But very clearly, what we've suggested to the government is like these 14 sectors with PLI. We are eventually a country that needs to give more and more jobs to people. So to create a new set of incentives for ELI, or employment-linked incentives, for large employment sectors, whether it's logistics, tourism, film, gaming. So that is one significant recommendation. Second, and Ravi talked about that, is much closer interaction between the center and the states. That will make a big difference in ensuring that we are able to bring in new investment and get it up and running in a very short period of time. And beyond that, I must say that the government is very open to suggestions as long as they are productive and towards the development of the country. So it's something we keep doing.
Okay, something we keep doing and going on. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us and giving us a perspective on where do we go from here and how do we become globalized in this setup and leverage this opportunity that's ahead of us. Thank you so much. The panelists will be available for conversations after this. So thank you.